Start recording. Okay, Tom, we're in a place to be. You doing okay tonight?
I am. I'm excited about this. It's after the work day, and so we get a chance to chill out.
Yeah, man, and I'm glad you're here because there's a couple things that that I guess your assistant sent me that I kind of wanted to chat about with you with because I'm kind of familiar with it, and I know, like for example, you worked at Oracle for a
I
while.
did for many
Yeah,
years. I
and
did.
so with my
Yep.
current position, we use from one side of the house, we use a lot of their products, but
Hmm.
I guess this so the listeners have a little bit of a background about you. I know you're the CEO of the Conservatory Group.
I
Um,
am.
yeah, and so how did all this come about? Like maybe give them a little brief introduction about yourself.
Yeah. What's interesting? So I consider myself a recovering executive, right? So I was out in the corporate world for several decades, and you get to a point where you're kind of like kind of wonder what are you going to do with what are you going to do when you grow up, right? Like what's the legacy going to be? What are you going to be able to tell your grandkids and all that?
Sure.
And what I found was that there was a handful of things that I wanted to do, and I wanted to harken back to how I grew up as a musician
Mm.
and how I learned things. And that's where the term conservatory comes from. I went to a music conservatory. It was very fond memories. I was a musician, thinking I would do that professionally. And I went to a music conservatory. And those that outside the U.S., conservatory means something else. Like in the U.K., it means like a greenhouse or something.
Mm.
It's a different meaning. But here, it's obviously a school where it's fine arts schools, usually music, and it's a really cool kind of place. It's more the school part is not like we would consider it. Like you don't sit down and listen to somebody lecture. It's multiple things. It's sitting down one-on-one with somebody helping you out. It's sitting down with an ensemble, figuring out what you want to do, jam sessions, all of that stuff. So you get all of these different experiences, a lot of senses kick in and how you learn
Sure.
music. And I guess, fast forward to today, after my life in corporate America and my life as a musician and how I learned, I thought I'd combine the two. And the punchline here is I take music conservatory processes and learning paradigms into the business world to teach people how to do a handful of things. But I work a lot with salespeople, how to become better salespeople,
Okay.
leadership. And so I combine all of that stuff into a big pot, and it seems to be fairly effective. So that's how I make a living lately.
Well, I mean, that's kind of makes sense because one thing, with doing these podcasts and getting my thoughts out and, talking with people like yourself, I've learned that over the years, my life experiences, what I've done, what I've messed up on, that I've kind of learned and grown over my years, obviously. And I kind of combined all those things and take what I like, take what I've learned, and, like you said, throw them in a big pot and, just kind of
Yep.
stir that up and make a little magic happen. And, like you said, that, you're teaching people how to be, leadership and sales, and that you use everything you've been taught over the years and make it happen. And it's kind of a cool thing that I used to not really think about that. I used to, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but I used to just, I guess, overlook it and just not realize like, hey, I was taught a couple lessons through life and I just, didn't really analyze it at the time.
Well, it's interesting because I think when we're younger, we're impressionable, right? You you
Oh, I agree.
you you tend to listen to your elders, superiors, what do you want to call it, and you kind of take it all at face value. It's like apparently they must know more than I do, so you
Sure.
take it. And as you grow older, you find out that hey, we all have our issues and problems, and we're not all perfect, but there's a lot of truth mixed in there, and you start discerning what works, what doesn't work for you. I mean, the fact is that we're all very unique. And one of the reasons anyway, that we're all very unique is we are a compilation of our experiences.
Okay.
And so, it's taking a paradigm of snowflake, right? There's no two identical snowflakes. I find it very difficult to believe that there are two similar people just because of all of experiences. You and I started before the podcast recording, kind of talking about where we live, and we're affected by our environment,
Agree.
and the people around us and everything that goes with it. You put all of that, and then I think as you get older and you sort of look back and very reflective. And by the way, as my career has gone through, I am a super over the top reflective person.
Mm,
So I'm an avid journaler, right? I journal everything.
nice.
And as I get older, I journal more and more and different, and I do it in a present tense. Like I not only do I want the data, but I want the emotion. Like, what am I feeling now? Like, if I'm mad right now for whatever reason, doesn't matter. I write that down, right? And I write it down in how best I can describe how I feel, because it's not just about what happened, but how it happened and when it happened, with who it happened, and all this. And these become experiences. And the fact is that you can learn not only as an individual, but also as you try to scale. That was one of the reasons that I did what I wanted to do around sales. Was I wanted to scale. I wanted, and the way you scale your experiences and your learning is by getting it out there, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be doing this podcast or writing articles or whatever. And so that's a little bit of therapeutic on my perspective, because I get a chance to do that. But I also hope that it's valuable information for other people. And again, using my mixed experience, I hopefully, Chris, we can be acquaintances anyway, maybe friends in the future, where this podcast conversation actually touches each one of us, right? Like you'll learn something, I'm going to learn something from you that I'm going to embed and go, oh, I remember Chris said that one thing on that
Yeah.
Tuesday. It was pretty cool. And I'm going to take that forward.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one good thing about doing these, like all the different conversations that I have, and, and like all the different topics that I do, just because I don't want to pigeonhole myself into one different thing. It's just that I get to learn something new, each time I do these almost, just like one way you handle the situation, or, how you use music to what you're doing now, and just cool little things like that, I never would have thought about. And just like you were talking about journaling, and that was something that's it's a new habit for me right now, because I don't do it every day, but I try to make myself do it at least once or twice a week. And Jordan Peterson talks about how if you journal, like it's really powerful. You become a dangerous man because you articulate your thoughts, and
Yeah.
be able to write down your thoughts and be able to articulate them then, and stuff like that. So yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying.
I've been journaling since '96.
Nice.
And I started pen and paper, still do some pen and paper, because it's just the stroke of writing something on papers is also cathartic. But I do a lot of electronic journaling.
Sure.
I also journal. So my journaling takes all sorts of forms too, by the way. Some of it is spiritual and more sort of in touch with myself, but a lot of it is like work journaling, like what happened at work, and what was the strategy that employed or didn't work, or whatever, right? So you remember, I mean, I think it's was it David Allen from Getting Things Done, right? Basically said the brain is meant for thinking, not for storing. And so the idea is get all the stuff on paper and go back, and you can always get data. But if you can keep churning on that data and that information, you can come up with innovative ideas and thoughts and be able to share with those. So yeah, my journaling has evolved. I journal every day. Every day. It's like brushing your teeth, in the sense that you'll miss, if I don't journal, I miss it. Like I don't get wound up on, well, in the morning I do 18 pages of it. I don't get all formal like that.
Nice.
But sometime during the day, some journaling thing is probably anywhere between 500 to 1,000 words on something will show up. Yep.
You ever thought about taking those journals and making like a book out of it, or some kind of audio?
I have.
Yeah.
So that brings us a different way. So in 2009, my wife contracted breast cancer. Um, and it was a very, very, very difficult journey. Now, let's just get to the punchline. She's alive and well, and she's in remission, and everything's fine.
Good.
There's no, I'm not going to go down that path.
Okay.
However, when she started, that became a journal unto itself. I wanted to feel the emotions, understand what's going on, that I started laying out. And the idea for me, along with some other stuff, is to make that into a book, because I learned a lot of stuff from that experience. It's kind of a weird thing that I've heard. There's a gentleman, like after my wife contracted breast cancer, there's a gentleman that came out of nowhere, and he calls me, and he called me once, and we talked, and I've never heard, I don't know who the guy was or anything. He just heard of my situation and wanted to give me encouragement.
Mhm.
And he basically says, look, Tom, it's the worst thing. Like, you will never want to wish this on your worst enemy, and yet you're going to be so glad you went through it. And he said that, and I'm like, first of all, I thought he was nuts. I was like, this is probably not the thing I needed to hear now.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting here, after so many, 13 years or whatever it's been now. He's absolutely right. And I just felt as if, as I journaled and my thoughts and ideas and what happened, that maybe other people can reap the benefits of that too. So it's one, and by the way, that continues, right? Because once you have cancer, you have cancer. It just doesn't necessarily go away. Like it's not like the flu or anything. But it gives me hope that perhaps I can get that out the door to people and have them, learn, and know that it's that there's lots of other people going through it. I mean, when you go through it, you think you're the only person on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like, that's a whole different topic right there, that you think
Yep.
you're the only one and you're really not. And again, that's another lesson I've learned doing these podcasts, is that, some people have these thoughts or these problems, like you said, and you think you're the only one going out through there, but there's a ton of people going through there. It's just whether it's, being shown or, externalized or not. And one thing I wanted to know, though, while you're talking about, journaling, this question popped in my head that, when you say you started back in the 90s, you started writing?
96. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever go back and reread?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And like, I was wondering, like, all right, so, 96, I mean, when you read something here in 2022, I mean, do you have different feelings?
Yep.
You interpret it different, or,
I'll give you sort of the common one.
Okay.
And the common feeling is you go through a valley of some kind of your life. Something bad happens, and it's the worst thing that has ever happened in your life, right?
Sure.
And you're writing it down, and you're saying you're in despair, and you're using words like that. And then you forget. You go through it and you forget, right? You just figure it out and you do all this other stuff. And then sometimes you feel that again, like, now I know that was bad, but now what I'm going through is the worst thing in my life, right? And so what's interesting, it's healthy, is you go back to that other level of despair and then read through that. So you don't forget, I am a spiritual religious person. And so I have strong faith in God, and I do believe that I find myself seeking his help, and sometimes going through that gives you a sense of hope from what you're currently going, because you just forget. You're human, right? You forget how, like, you were in the valley and now you're at the peak, and then you're back down in the valley, and you forget the previous valley. And that's probably one of the more common things that I use. Another way is sometimes, like for business journaling, sometimes you have a problem.
Yeah.
And you journal the solution and how you got out of it. And sometimes you're like, hold on a second. This is very reminiscent of a problem that I had 5 years ago or something. Let me flip through my journals and find it. And then sort of look at it and go, oh yeah, oh, that's right. We took this angle, or we call this guy, or whatever it was. So that's another calming way. And then the last thing is, it'll be interesting for my kids or legacy to get, I'm going to turn it all over, right, to my family once I'm long and gone, and it won't matter. And have them know a little bit about who I am.
Well, yeah, it helps just because, I know you have your PhD and you're an author and a researcher, and that, knowing that what you went through in life, and just that, somebody's there to reflect on your your teachings, I guess you want to say that, or your experiences or whatever. It's just, it's a whole different level of education, that.
I mean, do you imagine if we all did this? If we all did this with the amount of data, information, knowledge, especially now, one of the interesting things that I've been reflecting on, especially going through this recession that we're kind of going through, it's kind of a weird time,
Sure.
but it's not really a weird time. And the reason I say that is because we've done it before. The internet's been alive and well since what, 94, something like that. Okay. 95. When Al Gore invented it. And
I caught
that. But anyway, now you've got a place, right? You got a centralized place, because back in the day, I'm probably old enough to be your dad, but back in the day, you went to a library, right? And you read books and you were only really as good as your library. And then libraries started specializing. You had to go to different libraries and newspapers and look through stuff, and everything was hard copy. Come on, man. I mean, everything is at your fingertips.
Yeah.
And so what I find interesting is that we can learn so much. Now it's not, we've been through 2 recessions. And I mean, I'll give you an interesting statistic that came out in a report. This report actually came out in 2009. And basically it was a report that said, during the recession, a bunch of people on the top of the Fortune 500 dropped their leadership position, and a bunch of people at the bottom of the Fortune leapfrogged into leadership positions during that time. And people say, well, how did that happen? Well, the people at the top, right, they nailed everything down. Hey, let's not spend any money. Let's lay people off. Let's not do anything. And at the people at the bottom, like, look, we got to do something because we're here at the bottom. So they invested, right? They hired people, invested and developed and innovative. And the next thing you know, boom, they're taking market share from other people and dropping it down. That is now all very well documented here. So here we go again. Somebody, and this hopefully is a word of encouragement to your listeners. It's like somebody's going to do well. And that person could be you. Yeah. And the magic behind doing well is this is the time to make the move. This is the time to be innovative, to think out of the box. all of those pithy sayings that are unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, very true. And, don't be the guy that sort of, nails everything down and just said, oh, we'll just make, we'll weather the storm and we'll get through it, because you might stay exactly where you are, but someone's going to leap over you.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things that, when these moments in life come, that, like you said it best, you got to think outside the box. That way you can catch the next wave of whatever. And that way,
exactly.
Yeah. And just, you don't have to go listen, do your own research, don't go listening to every expert out there. And I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to them. I'm just saying that you do your own research, and then you can, like you said, think outside the box. You can catch that next wave going back up. Just, that way you can leapfrog onto the next whatever.
I mean, what's interesting is, we are and every day that goes by, I forget what ridiculous amount of data gets loaded in the internet by gazillion websites, but every day that goes by, that's just more and more and more information. Now, some of it, heck, a lot of it is garbage. But use some discernment. Mm-hmm. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when we're going through the .com bust and all that, we didn't really have a lot of that research and that data available to people, because, again, the internet was only around for about 5 years or so.
Yeah.
But now it's, closer to 25 years. Yeah. And there's a bunch of data out there that they basically says, look, here's the recipe to do well. And again, you've got the shysters out there that you got to kind of watch out for, the get rich quick guys, but there are innovative ways of doing it. So I guess my point is, there's this entire wave of information that's available. Going back to the journaling discussion, I see that as my sort of data set that's surrounds my experience. Yeah. It's always interesting to lean in on.
Yeah. You take those pearls and gems like we're talking about, and, you don't have to take everything exactly what, you did like through your life, but you take those good pearls and gems, like you said, about scenarios and things you could have done different, or, the way it turned out. Like, oh, wait, it's nothing wrong with taking that advice. But I think, when people do, get on the internet wave and they're starting to look at people, like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Obama. I mean, whoever you want to say, and like, oh, they did it they did everything this way, this way, this way. I need to do it that way. But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. And that's when things kind of fall apart. But it's like, well, you're two different people, just cause person A was able to do it one way doesn't mean it might work for person B, but you got to adapt to your own style and learn your own leadership to expand,
Agreed.
Yeah. And I think that's just where I don't want to say a lot of problems can, happen, but it tends to be a problem that, it's just like, I don't understand, I try to do the same type leadership, that, Tom did and
Yep.
and I couldn't be a CEO, I failed.
Yep.
And it's where like some people, I guess they beat themselves down rather than learn from their mistakes.
Yeah, it was very interesting is so to get in my PhD program, you had to write, it's a rather difficult process just in of itself, right? You had to write a few essays and papers and go through some interviews and all this. And I wrote one paper I wrote about leadership. It was so there's you or your listeners might have heard of the book, The Leadership Challenge.
Sounds familiar.
So yeah, Leadership Challenge has been around since 1987. The two authors are Kouzes and Posner. And basically what it is, it's a really cool type of approach to writing a book. Was they kind of distill leadership characteristics into like 36 different traits.
Okay.
And they're two professors out of California, I think, do different universities that spoke on leadership, and they would do these workshops. And what they would do is they would pass out these worksheets, and they said, pick your top 5 leadership traits. And then they would write about it. And I think if you go out to Amazon, I think it's maybe the 5th edition or something like that of the book. There was probably 7, 8 traits that always bounced around in the top 5, like year over, like when they would reissue the book.
Yeah.
But there was one trait that was number 1 all the time.
What's
one
that?
Trait that happened. I'm gonna play a game here with you. One trait that made it number 1 every single issue with a bullet. Can you guess what that is?
One trait.
Leadership trait.
Integrity.
Close. It's actually integrity was one of the top 5, but it's not number 1.
That was the first one that came to my head.
Yeah.
I don't know. Help me out.
Honesty.
I was going to say loyalty next, but okay.
Yeah. So honesty. Now the interesting. So my thesis was the following. This I'm going to circle back to your point here earlier.
Good.
So I wrote my thesis and I ended the thesis with a question, and I'll put that question in front of you and your listeners. And I don't have an answer for this. That's what made it kind of interesting. And they accepted me into the program. I said, do you think that it's honesty because we see it all the time and we see it with good leaders? Or do you think it's honesty because we don't see it in leaders and we're looking for it?
It's a good question.
I mean, if I see it all the time and it works, then I think it's honesty. And so therefore it's got to be that. Or I think it's honesty because I don't see it. And I think every leader should have it.
Was it one of those?
Because face it, we've got, we've got a whole bunch of fallen leaders out there.
Sure. Was it one of those things that a leader shouldn't share 100% of their knowledge to their?
Yeah. I mean, is it one of these things that you want to protect your people from the realities, and so therefore you get caught up, or are you trying to, sneak one by, or are you trying, so I kind of left it open, and I really have never gotten an answer to that. And it's, it's one of those things, but what I found interesting like I said, if you go back to that book and read it, and I've read multiple editions because they always add like more stuff and they get more information, and you see it all kind of progress, and you're thinking like, but that's number 1 every single time. Like all the other ones kind of bounce around, like I said, maybe it's like 7 or 8 other ones that bounce around the 4, the other 4 of the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
But that one was always number 1. And I used so I'm a little bit older than you, but as I mentioned earlier, but I used the Frost interviews with Richard Nixon. And this was when Richard Nixon, of course, was removed. He was impeached.
Okay.
As president back in the 70s. And he says this line, and he says it, and I used it in like this sort of this super smooth, cool. He goes, if the president does it, it's not illegal.
Interesting.
I mean, and he said it like it was fact. And I looked at it, and you watch it. There's on the video. You can go to YouTube. You can see the original interviews. You look at the guy and you go, that guy believes that. That guy believes exactly what he said. And so I always thought to myself, was that sort of the beginning of, because I mean, if you go back and know the Richard Nixon, I mean, Watergate, that scandal, was right
about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can go and pick all that up on the internet, but let's just say he was far from honest what he did. But that's what he said. He was kind of dumbfounded that they were having this discussion about this, because he said, if the president does it, it's not illegal. And even Frost was looking at him like, what?
That can be.
So anyway, I digress a little bit, but the questions that you were bringing up about everyone's got their voice, if you will. I'm going to paraphrase what you were saying earlier, their style or whatever.
Yeah.
How can you communicate that in its intention? Which is, by the way, another real hard thing to measure is someone's intention.
Yeah, the real motivation or whatever they're doing and why they're
doing. I mean, again, right? Like just like you said earlier about, are people honest or not as honest? How's that?
There you
go. Because they're trying to save their people from something.
Sure.
And so there's that intention, or are you trying to keep something from me because I want, you don't want me to find out something. Measuring tension is very, very difficult. One of my professors used to use this as an example about intention. So let's say you're walking down the street and you see some guy building a grill, brick and mortar, right? And he's putting it all in. And it's all kind of obtuse and it's all weird and stuff. And you're like, you come up to the guy and go, you're not building that grill right. It's not going to work. And the guy looks at you, grill? I'm building abstract art. What are you talking about? Right. But yet you had it one view and he had it another view, like from an intentional perspective. I mean, that's probably a good example of what people do like all the time. Like you look at somebody's observation and go, I can't believe the guy's doing this or he said that. And meanwhile, there's this whole other reason why.
Working in corporate America and now being a CEO, and did you notice your leadership style changing a lot, or did you kind of stick to a path that you found that worked for yourself?
That's a really good question to ask me now, because I think my answer changed over time.
Yeah.
You sit there and you think about yourself like everyone thinks they're a leader, and to some extent you can be. It's positions got very little to do with leadership. It's really the behaviors, and if you want to take like an operational definition, of leadership is, is influencing others to achieve a common goal, right? I mean, that's leadership, right? In a box. So over time, I found out that there are certain leadership things that I don't necessarily do as well. Like, let me start from the beginning. I'm not a very good manager.
Okay.
And what I mean by manager is, I use Peter Drucker's definition, right? Managers do things right. Leaders do the right things.
Okay.
So managers are right, process oriented, getting things done in deadlines, making sure that people you need those guys. You need those people to do that. Then you have leaders that put managers in situations to be able to influence that a common goal. Like, I don't necessarily think I'm inspirational. Like, you always think, oh, the inspirational. Nah, I don't see myself as inspirational. I don't see myself as somebody that would sort of have great presence in a room or anything like that. And at the same time, I see myself as a very good coach and mentor. And that's kind of the thing that I'm a strengths-based kind of guy, like work on your strengths, mitigate your weakness.
I agree.
And I go, okay, so I'm really good coach and mentoring. So that's going to be my thing, right? I'm going to get better at it. And that's what I'm going to use. And if I need to manage things or inspire others or whatever, I'm going to figure out somebody else to help me do that.
Yeah.
Once you figure that out, you're going to be successful. And it's okay to be able to come back and say, something, I'm not good at this, or there's other people better than me. There's a whole bunch of interesting little fun statistics in a book called I think it's called Give and Take by Adam Grant.
Okay.
And in there, it talks about like all these surveys. Like there was a survey about rating yourself at an engineering firm. And 98% of the engineers rated themselves in the top 5%.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't, right. I mean, you can't go wrong. Like because I'm a statistician, right? So you can't go wrong by saying the following: I'm probably an average leader. Because that's going to be the greatest population, right? If you work off that premise and say, okay, you're an average leader, but what of those things are not as average, like below average? And what are those things that are above average?
Mm-hmm.
Dump the things that are below average and get really good at those things that are above average. And guess what? You start creeping up. But I would say that most of the people that are truly the average leader are the ones that think that they're the great leaders.
I would agree.
And they just kind of sit there, and it's sort of the right thing to do. Like, I don't think it's helpful for anybody that all of a sudden, because you stop learning. Like if you say, I'm great at whatever, I mean, pick a thing. Like someone says, hey, Chris, are you a good leader? What are you going to say?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course I am.
Yeah, came out the womb bleeding.
Come on, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
If you leave it there, it's like, well, are you done? Are you going to learn anymore? Are you going to be introspective and say, yeah, I think I'm a average leader, but there's things that I do better than others, and there are things that are not as good as other. I mean, that's what average is.
I agree.
Right. And and once you come to that idea, then I think that just kind of liberates you to become better. And and so you're asking me about that. It's like, that's the journey. If you would ask me that same question 10 years ago, you probably would have gotten yeah, of course I am. What are you talking about? Mm-hmm. And then finally you kind of look in the mirror and go, no, yeah, I'm probably average, but some things are not as good and some things are good. Have the fortitude of dumping the stuff you're not good and jumping on the stuff you are good at.
Well, that's another piece of just being very self-aware of your own abilities and strengths and weaknesses, and being served a piece of humble pie, throughout your life. I hate that sometimes that happens, but I think sometimes it needs to happen so you don't get this inflated ego of thinking that you're the next, I don't know, great leader of whoever you want to say. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that usually, I forgot that quote, but it's like, hey, if you have to tell everybody that you're great, you're probably not great. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so going back to my leadership things, I'm a pretty good coach and mentor.
Okay.
I'm definitely above average. Okay. So I'm going to go there. I'll put that on the table.
Yeah.
One of the things I do with leaders that are still in that, yeah, I'm good leader mode, is I'll sit in a room with a one-on-one with the leader, usually an executive or company or something, and they'll say something like, they'll just start blaming everybody, right? It's like, well, the market and him, and I got to deal with that, and it's like everyone else is a problem.
Exactly, it's never their fault. It's
right. And so I'll ask the question, well, what'd you do about it? And they're like, what do you mean? What did I do about it?
Why nothing?
I'm like, yeah, usually it's nothing. And I said, and this is a little piece of advice for everybody that's listening. The minute you blame anyone or anything, you do two things. Number one, you're pointing to the cause of the problem, but you're also pointing to the cause of the solution. Meaning you're smuggling away the solution. If I were to say, if you worked for me, Chris, and I was a boss, and it was just all going haywire, and somebody says, what the heck's going on? That damn Chris, man, he just sucks, at everything he does. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Okay, so not only is that quote unquote a blame, but if Chris is the problem, then Chris also is the solution. And if you push it off, you can't fix it. Like, right. What am I going to do? Like, if you are the person to blame, then what do I do as a leader? Nothing. I can't, because I just pushed it off to you. But if I say, Chris has really been a problem. However, I need to take the initiative of doing the following 8 things to fix that problem.
Sure.
And then turn around and say, yeah, that's, and therefore me not doing this is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? The minute you say that, you can fix it. But if you leave it on like I said, circumstances, right? The economy, the recession, we're, for most companies out there, they're going into Q4. And boy, there's going to be lots of excuses going to come up of people, this happened, that didn't happen, that. I mean, and that's a realization that I came, because especially when you're in corporate America, you feel as if you're threatened. Right? You feel as if I don't have a good answer, then, I'm, my head's in the chopping block or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's the wrong attitude. I think the thing is, hey, look, here's the 2 things I didn't do. Here are the 3 things I'm going to do about it. You get a plan, you take it on, and then you go fix it. I think it's a lot healthier to have that approach, because I think a lot of manufactured problems would get fixed.
Is this one of the issues of corporate America? You have these projections, like you just talked about, going into Q4, and everything's always supposed to be better than the year before, like as far as sales, and I don't know, but the CEO is supposed to get their money right, and all the, everything else is supposed to be better than next year. And it's always got to do better, got to do better, got to do better.
Yep.
And it seems like just to be added a ton more stress, where, you're already making, 10, 20% profit than you did last year, but it's still not good enough to meet, your bosses and stuff. And so stress comes into play, and then the motivation just gets torn down because you may or may not, meet those goals and stuff. And it's just like, is there a time like when corporate America, or even any business, I guess, should be like, oh, hey, we're doing good. We're in the green. Why should we keep pushing? And, like, when does it stop? And I think I guess that's my question. Like, is that, maybe one of the issues with corporate
Well,
America?
I mean, there's a saying in corporate America: if you're not growing, you're dying. I mean, I would say most people believe that. Now, to some extent, I do believe that. But I don't. But here's the key to this, and this is another sort of interesting research angle to this.
Yeah,
is there's many ways to grow. Now, most people see growth as sort of a top line or bottom line type of number. So that number has to be bigger last year than it was this year. Okay, fine. But there's lots of ways of doing it. One day is sort of more of the same, but the other thing might be more of different. And if you again, it's funny you mention it. that kind of circle back around to that article I was talking about the recession and people sort of swapping places. Most of those people that sort of leapfrog did that. We're gonna add and we're gonna like shore up areas that we weren't.
Oh,
Different regions, different solutions, and that's how I'm going to grow. But I think a lot of times, everybody is kind of a one-trick pony when it comes down to growth. There are two types of changes in corporate, actually anywhere. When you do some kind of change management and transformation of a company, there's two types.
sure.
One is a financial change, meaning more money, less cost, something. The other one is increased capabilities. That's it. All changes boil down to that. And that comes from some research coming out of two gentlemen, Beer and Narita. They had a huge book called Cracking the Code of Change. And that's their conclusion they came. Now, what's interesting is if you're looking for what they call economic change, it's a top-down approach. You take leadership, and leadership basically says, okay, I'm going to put people in place. We're going to cut heads. We're going to add heads. Whatever we're going to do. In a capability change, it's a bottom up. It starts from the bottom and moves up. Here's the problem. Most of the time when you're trying to do capability changes, people try to implement it from the top. And it never works. And so this is a very good recession topic, because many times people are looking to leaders, or leaders feel as if they have to do something, and they go, okay, well, let's say they figure out and they go, well, I'm not going to cut heads, or I'm not going to do any of that. I want to spend some money and be innovative and hire the right people and grow, change your capability. So I'm going to mandate that. That never works. What you need to do is you need to empower the people below to take over and tell you what to do. That's one of the problems about being a CEO and going up the ladder, is you just get further away from the action.
I like
it's the difference between dancing on the dance floor or watching it from the balcony. I used to do this training session where, in a busy New York intersection, I'd say, hey, let's cross the street. So we'd be all down, cross the people pushing and shoving, and you're trying to cross the street, and it's like yelling, and people go, get the hell out of my way. And you got cabs honking the horn at you. And it's just, you're just trying to get across the street without getting killed.
Right.
Then you'd go to like the 40th floor of some high rise, and then you look down on that intersection. It's all peaceful and quiet around you, but you're watching. You could see people just pushing and shoving, but you're not in it. So there's some goodness and some badness, right?
I see.
The goodness is you're not in it, so you're not going to get, sort of, how do you call it? Get hit, get whatever when you're down there. But at the same time, you don't have an appreciation of what's going down there either. And so I think both are good things to have, and I think both perspectives are important. And I think sometimes when leaders ascend into a higher position, I think they forget that part.
Yeah. Well, my first couple of my jobs growing up, I was on a factory floor, manufacturing plant or whatever, just doing the same thing over and over again. And I remember thinking that when the bosses came down or a leader came down, it's like, y'all don't really know what's going on down here. And, all you're caring about is just numbers and, what's on paper and stuff like that. I remember having that thought that, because they seem to make it think like, and I guess they were doing their best of their jobs. I'm not knocking it, but it was always just like, get pat on the back, keep going, doing your thing. And then but we still, it's kind of, what is it, a backhanded compliment, still expecting more out of you. And I always remember just like, you get down here and you make these things for 8 hours. Man.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because that turned into the Toyota way. I mean, you could read a book about it, and lean manufacturing came from that attitude,
Mm,
where the Toyota manufacturers decided that anybody on the line could pull the cord and stop the line if they saw a problem.
yeah.
Now, anybody who's ever been in the auto industry or any manufacturing industry as a laborer would tell you, no, man, I'm not pulling. I'm not the guy that's going to pull the cord or stop this whole line. I'm going to just, I'm going to just do my, I got, maybe you're building a car or whatever, and your job is to put the rear quarter panel on there. And as it goes by, you see that that the front quarter panel is kind of skewed. Hey, but that's not your job, right? So
Yeah.
you're not going to pull the cord. And leaders in Toyota, and that's why they made Toyota Way, said, well, who's going to see it then? If you see it go by, I'm the boss. I'm not going to see it. I'm not going to see it till it probably is in the showroom floor and somebody's going to complain about it.
Yeah.
If you see it, you need to stop the line.
For sure.
And so they installed all of these rip cords in the factory. So then when someone saw something, they would pull it, dude, come over, fix it,
Cute.
right? And then turn it back on. And then the quality just shot up. I mean, that whole process is metaphorical to, heck, even knowledge workers in organizations, right? If you see something wrong, you need to be able to pull the cord, if whatever that cord is in your company.
Is that one of those things? It's kind of a mentality, especially in today's time, that if you see something wrong, like you're on a street, that crowded street, and you see somebody getting mugged, or you see
exactly, yeah,
and you're like, oh, somebody else would call it. I don't.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm just gonna keep on going.
That's I gotta. There's a terrible story about back in the 70s, young lady being raped in New York, in the alley, and the police came and she was murdered. Police came and they interviewed everybody. 37 people heard her and did nothing.
Wow.
And why? A, scared, or B,
somebody else.
It's New York. Somebody else will do it.
Yeah.
37 people. I mean, okay, that's a little deep for our conversation, but it makes the point.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't get why. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to think. Maybe it's just a thought I'm just trying to think out loud, but it seems like that's just more of the case more often than not when you hear of things, rather like that, or even in a workplace. It's always like, oh, it's not my problem. Somebody else will figure it out. I don't need to get involved. And, or it's just like, oh, I always hear, well, that's above my pay grade. Why should I say something and stuff? And it's like, well, man, I mean, don't you want to do a good job? I mean, don't you want to, at least, say you're putting your name on this, or you're saying that you do this stuff. I mean, where's the integrity, like we were talking about earlier? Where's the honesty? Where's the saying that?
Well, and the reality is that many people that don't have been burnt. I mean, what if you would go down there and the young lady was getting raped and you go do something, maybe next thing you're getting stabbed or you getting shot at or whatever, right? You're like, I don't even know her, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm not suggesting that that's the right thing to do. I'm just saying that's something that unfortunately is a very understandable thing to do. Or, the thing that you found wrong at work was actually your boss's mistake. And then you don't even know, like you see a mistake and you don't know who did it. You just sort of raise your hand and go, hey, look, there's this mistake. Yeah. Next thing you know, it's your boss who's going, dude, you outed me, man. What's up with that? And then you're like, and you get an earful of that. I'm not doing that. Yeah. As opposed to what the boss should have said is, hey, man, thanks for covering me, or thanks for pulling, Sure. But I hear it all the time that people just, get the wrong end, the shaft, they get shafted because, they outed, somebody that they shouldn't have outed, even though the mistake was a real one.
Yeah, Robert Greene, he wrote a book, 48 Laws of Power, and one of the laws of power is that you should never outsign the master or the boss or whatever. And so I think that's kind of where some of that comes from, is that if you do like you said, say something about, if your boss messed up or whatever, then of course, instead of that, your boss owning that, hey, okay, I screwed up. That's my bad. I'm sorry. Or,
Yeah.
it's like, hey, if you outshine it, like you said, oh, that your boss is going to be out to get you from now on, and you'll be lucky to have a job the next day. So I think that's just a mentality.
I mean, and it's alive and well, and people sort of have these conversations on podcasts like you and I. Wonder why we do it. I mean, I could tell you, man, when I was in corporate America, I believe me, no what's the saying? No good deed will go unpunished.
Yeah,
Right? I mean, you think you're doing the right thing, and next thing you know, you're getting punished for, one thing or another because, you said the wrong thing in the wrong group of people or whatever.
mm-hmm.
I had this conversation one time with somebody going, sending emails. This is as simple as sending an email. You got some meeting about something and you send it to the people you think should be at the meeting. Well, guess what? You didn't add your boss, or you didn't add some other's boss, somebody else's boss.
Oh, yeah.
Next thing you know, you get the email from somebody who sent it to somebody. Hey, just want to let you know that Tom didn't, he didn't invite Chris. I don't know what's up, and then that just becomes a big deal. And then you come in and say, well, how come you didn't invite me? Well, dude, I mean, I just didn't think it was, you needed to be there. Well, why didn't you think of me? You think I'm important? No, blah, 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 blah. And the next thing you know, the next meeting invites got like 200 people on the on the list, just like covering my bases to make sure I don't miss anybody. I mean, these are very real problems. And then next thing you know, you've got 150 people at your meeting and you only needed 8, just because so how do you fix? I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you fix it. I mean, obviously it's a cultural thing that needs to get fixed. There's it's real productivity or the real dollars down the drain. And I just think we've got to do a better job there too, for all sorts of different reasons.
That scenario you just explained, I work in higher education, and I've seen that countless times, just with an easy, simple meeting that's only supposed to be with, like you said, 2 or 3 people, 4 people at the most. And then all of a sudden, well, how come I didn't get invited? And it's just like, oh, okay, I didn't know it was necessary. And then, again, it's the exact same scenario. And it's just like, man, is this just inflated egos where your job title makes you think you have to be at every meeting or whatever? And just it's great if you want to come, that's fine. But are you going to contribute? I mean, or did you really think you needed to be there just because of your X person? And
I did an experiment in 1 month about that exact same thing, because it worked the other way for me. Like I was on every freaking meeting. I was included. I was like, I'm like, I don't even know these people. What are we going to talk about? So I would not accept. Like I just would just let it go.
Sure.
And I got to tell you, out of 9 out of 10 meetings happened without me. And the way I would know is I would wait. If somebody really needed me there, then they would send an email to say, hey, Tom, I see you didn't accept. We really need you there. Then I'd like, okay, that's an extra email to tell me that's going on. But 9 out of 10 times, nobody even knew I wasn't there. Next thing you know, I'm opening up my calendar. It's like I got all sorts of extra time to do stuff, because it's the other side of that coin when people are like, well, Tom better be in that meeting, because you certainly don't want to miss him. And I'm like, whatever possessed you that I'm like that way. I must have said something. So, excuse me. So let me see if I can reverse it and just not show up and see if, people are, no, meetings went on fine. Problems got fixed. Everything was fine. So I'm like, all right, there you go. There you go.
And, and having these discussions, you're like talking about, leadership in corporate America and just our scenarios that we just laid out right there. And do you think that people can be successful with or without an ego? Or do you need to have some type of an ego to be successful?
I think, the way ego's defined today, no, we don't need it. I think we need I'll give you a good example. And this is I like to use emotional examples to make my point. Going back to my wife with her breast cancer, right? So now we got to find a doctor, right? Like, who's going to do this, right? You got to go find an oncologist that knows what he's doing, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So I go to this guy, we go, and I'm kind of I'm pretty pissy about that. I'm like, I'm emotionally stretched. I'm a little pissed off, right? I'm a little nervous. So I'm giving this guy like the what fors. I'm like, this, I'm like interviewing him basically for him to be my wife's oncologist. And I finally said, he's going on and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And we're going to take this step. And then finally I said to him, well, I said something like, what do you, so what if it doesn't work? Like, what if this, what if she dies? Or he says,
Yeah.
well, for that to happen, cancer's got to go through me. And I'm the effing best.
I like it.
Right?
Yeah. That's what I would want to hear.
And I'm like sold, right? I'm like,
sure.
Right? Somebody else might have said, well, I mean, I mean, we're going to do our best and, we're going to take care of her. You would have heard all of that sugarcoating because, I mean, face it, right? We're talking about cancer. I get it. Right. Yeah. But he just basically says, that cancer's got to go through me and I'm the effing best. And I'm like, so is that ego? Right? Is that confidence? Did he say that for my well-being? I think he did.
Yeah.
Right.
Could be.
I think there's things, I mean, you want to follow a leader that's got some level of, chutzpah, right? I mean, he's got some kind of spunk in him, right?
Yeah,
he's
got a swag to him. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's, you don't want to be the, I don't know, maybe I'll try my best. It's like, I don't need to hear that. And this is right. This is the inspirational part of leadership that I always have a challenge with, because I'm pretty black and white, as you picked up by now, but I'm like, but I think if you're speaking about leadership, there's some of that, whatever you want to call it, swag, confidence, ego. I think you need that because you have to instill hope in your followers.
Yeah. Yeah. What is that? Even if you don't know that, if you speak confidently about something that, if you sell it that way, most people will still follow you, whatever, not even think otherwise of what you're doing.
Oh, I mean, heck, right? I mean, and then there's the intention part, right? I mean, I wrote a paper a long time ago, and it was basically on the whole Enron thing that went down in 2000. And, I went back and I mean, Ken Lay, who was the CEO of Enron, I went back and listened to him, right? Obviously after the fact, but I wrote a whole paper about all of this and the this idea of transformational leadership. He was you would see him throw out the first pitch at a Rangers game, right? The Texas Rangers, because that's where they're from, right? And you got all these people and everybody would be like, swooning over this guy. I just think that is a misuse of some of that as well. And this is the intention part. I mean, the fact is that, the guy was a crook and, he knew exactly what he was doing. But he figured, look, I can, as long as we keep this going, people will believe it, then they'll buy us and we'll get the money. I mean, that's what it was. Like, let's fake it till we make it kind of thing. But we're talking about people's lives. I researched a lot about this thing. There was a lady, and just to make it real specific, right? When I start talking about Enron and the billions of dollars that were lost on that alone, people's heads explode. They're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Well, let me make it super clear. There was this executive administrator who was Enron for years. Her name was Sony Summers. She was interviewed. She lost $800,000 in her 401k.
Goodness.
Down to nothing. She was like, well, what possessed you to put all your money in Enron? I mean, we were killing it. Why wouldn't you?
Why would you? Exactly.
Right. I mean, I had at one point, $800,000 for my retirement. I mean, we know you keep this going. I'm at $2 million and I'm 50 years old. I'm going to retire. I mean,
Yeah.
why not? Why wouldn't you? Only to find out that was all just kind of fake. Lost her job, lost all $800,000.
Wow.
I mean, she didn't have 2 nickels to rub. I mean, she was. So, I mean, that's what I'm talking about, right? That's the kind of challenge and intention that you have with people. And that leadership can be used for good or for evil. I mean, you can think of all these cult leaders that had this grip on people. People will like,
good point.
Why would you even follow, whatever, David Koresh or, some of these guys? Well, that's the kind of power that these leaders had, this charisma over their followers. So it's a real thing, I guess, is my point. You have to be careful with.
Do you think a lot of people don't like to challenge? Like cult leaders. It seems like they usually, target people who are very weak-minded and don't really have a lot going on for them anyway, and that way they can just use that charisma to say, hey, come over here, everything will be rainbows and gummy bears or whatever the saying is. But like when looking up to strong leaders and a trait that you would want to see with a leader. People want to challenge those and they just want to go with whatever's said and just, hey, my life.
I don't know if it's so much about challenge as it is about self-confidence. I have been in room when I was younger. I remember being in a room where I came up with an idea and I just got ridiculed.
Ooh.
Like people laughed at me. Like that was it. Like now what's the reason I want to make this longer than it needs to be, but it was a really good idea that ended up becoming real through other people. Like they took my idea and did it themselves and got the credit and all this other stuff.
Of course.
But at the time, I'm sitting in the room. I provide this idea. My boss, his boss, people around me all just kind of chuckled and rolled their eyes and like, yeah, that'll never work. Okay. Well, do you think I'm going to open my mouth again? Right?
Yeah.
No. I mean, I felt foolish, right? I felt like, I didn't know what I was talking about, or did I miss the point? I went back and I thought to myself, like, boy, everybody reacted so weird to it. What did I miss? And I thought I was saying the right thing and all this other stuff. So it's not necessarily, I don't consider myself sort of weak-minded that way, but it happened to me. Mm-hmm. And I bet you, there's a bunch of, I can remember vividly having other ideas that I kept my mouth shut.
Sure. I've been there.
Right. So take that and I think, expand it to the charisma of cult leaders. And I think it's the same thing. You look at a cult leader or you look at somebody that's a superior to you, who all of a sudden you believe knows more about whatever it is that you're talking about.
Yep. You
don't want to look like a fool and you don't want to say anything. And guess what? They really don't. And I think that's the reality. I don't think it's a challenge issue. I think it's more internal.
Yeah. To your top point, I've always been I've been in that situation before where I don't want to get too specific and not overshare, but somebody a leader at some point asked for opinions on let's say topic X or whatever you want to say, and you gave them out to them, and just it wasn't what that person wanted to hear, or they just basically wanted a yes man or woman, whatever you want to say, and that they went on ahead and did exactly what they wanted to anyway. Then at the end of the day, it was like, well, what the hell did you even ask me for anyway? If you were just going to go do what you wanted to anyway, was that just you showing that, hey, I'm being a leader and I'm asking for input? But if you're not, even if it's the majority of the room saying, hey, well, why don't we change, point A to point B and let's not do C? It's just like, well, I don't get it, and that was one of those things that it's like, well, what the hell am I even doing? If you ask for my input again, then nah.
Yeah, you're gonna be like, yeah, that's fine. Whatever.
Yeah, just go do whatever you want to. Yeah,
that's right.
As long as
what's interesting is like if those that are listening again are in a situation and you have a leader in front of you, it's really, really one of the ways of sort of diagnosing the issue.
Sure.
Does the leader go last or does he go first? right? If the leader goes first, they want you to agree to their thing. If the leader goes last, they want to know reality because they don't want to taint the room. They don't want to taint your thinking.
Sure.
But I mean, and you can see it. You go in the room and says, "Hey, we got this problem, and I think we should, option A." Chris, what do you think?
Whatever.
What are you going to say?
Option A, good. Go for it.
Well, I mean, but my point is when to me, it's become so over the years of doing this. When I was younger, you don't pick up on this, right? But when you're, older like me and you go through it, you're like, okay, you're one of those guys. Got it, right? Yeah, option A is great. Have at it. And sometimes people go, well, we got this problem. Chris, what do you think? Boom, 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 boom. And then leader goes last and says, these are really good ideas. I was kind of leaning here, but I think I have to rethink it. All that stuff.
Yeah, and not only that, but I've learned that one of my supervisors taught me this, or he showed me this, however you want to say that. And I know we're getting kind of short on time here, but
no, take your time.
Okay, that it's also depending on who else is in that room with you, and it's like you said, tainting somebody's thinking. That just if your supervisor's in that room and you're talking about, that topic A or whatever, you might not say what you actually think just because of what your supervisor might say. And that was one thing I was like, that one of those things that never occurred to me during my, my young professional years about it does make sense. Like after I left the room, it's like, you know what? I was, thinking differently just because person A or person B was in that room. And
one of my favorite books that should be on everybody's shelf it's called Evidence-Based Management. And it's like, there's a subtitle to it.
Write that down.
But it's written by Sutton and Pfeffer.
Evidence-based.
So Jeffrey Pfeffer, another professor out of, I think Cal Berkeley, writes these great sort of in-your-face business books. And in there, evidence-based management, he basically says, look, you teach about evidence-based, like, gather your data and come up. That's kind of the premise of the book.
Sure.
But then he talks about like now be careful on how to use this. Because if you're sitting in a room with your boss and your boss's boss, and people are saying a bunch of stuff and you come around and go, well, I don't think so because bam, I got all this awesome data and you don't. Then people are like, never invite Chris to that meeting again. Right. So anyway, so I'm not going to spoil the rest of the book, but it's a great read. Gives you some ideas on how to be careful with that and how to actually gather good evidence for good point.
Yeah, I just wrote that I keep a list of books that when I'm talking to guests on here that I should be reading. So
yeah,
I wrote that down. But
I go back and read that one it's always one that keeps me kind of in check too, right? Because that's the other thing too, right? You get some, you get data and all of a sudden you feel like you've got this extra thing that no one else has. Some people use it for good, some people use it for evil.
Oh yeah.
So,
yeah. That's one thing I've learned that, when with data and stuff that you can make, even if you're creating the data, you can make it say whatever you want it to say, like whether it be good or evil. And, you can find charts probably anywhere to fit your points, but it's like, is that really though what's going on? So.
And it's the intention, right? Are you trying to solve the problem or are you trying to make yourself look good?
Exactly.
And it comes out, eventually. But anyway, so yeah, that's a great book for that kind of stuff. You just have to be careful on how to, judiciously use it. Because there's a lot of frailty. I had a CEO for a manufacturing company I was working with, and he was trying to buy wanted to buy my product. Mm. We had this conversation, and it's just him and I on the phone. And we had everybody else. It was just everybody else left. And I was having this conversation. And he goes, "Well, Tom, I just want to make the right decision, and what's good for my people in my company and all this." And I said, "That's BS." He goes, "What?" "Well, that's BS, man." He goes, "You don't want to look like a fool." That's what it is. So as soon as we can get past that, then we can have a real conversation. And he was like, "Well, I can't believe you said that." And I'm like, "I really want to help you. And I don't think this is the issue. I think you don't understand what's going on and you don't want to look like a fool and make the bad decision. So tell you what, why don't we help you with that?" And he finally fessed up. He goes, "You're right. I have no idea what I'm doing here." Mm-hmm. and I don't want to be found out, but I obviously do want to help people. I'm like, okay, good. So let's take care of your fear first, so then you can help your company and your people to make the right decision. So, having a big title or having a experience now, that doesn't, we're all people, right? One leg at a time, right? In the putting your pants on.
I like it.
And life would be a lot easier if people.
Oh, that is. Oh, you're back. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. You were frozen too. Yeah.
Cool. But good deal. I think we should take it home on that right there. We're all
right, my friend.
If people want to find you, anything you want to plug, all that good stuff, feel free to do.
Yeah. So, what's a little bit of my party trick. I've been around long enough that if you type my name, Tom Tonkin, in Google, the front page will be all of what I've done and presented in my thing, and be hard pressed not to find me. Certainly on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to find me. Feel free to connect with me. I am not ceremonious about that stuff. You want to give me a buzz, I'm good there too.
Cool. Well, Dr. Tom, I appreciate you having this little chat with me tonight, man.
Yeah, I hope your listeners got something out of it. And if they want to chat with me, like I said, pick something up, please give me a call.
All right. Sounds good, man. Thanks again.
Take care, my friend.
We're out here, folks.